Born in South Africa, loved sport, pursued it, reached the highest level of the sport. I played it, cap for my country.
And there's an advantage and chance here in the corner. The ball kept in.
Is that man again, Rhys Thomas?
Rhys Thomas getting his second try.
Got cut down in my prime at 29 from a heart attack. I thought I was going to die. The crew got there, they put me in the ambulance, put these ECGs on, and they said, yeah, you're having a heart attack. And I was like, what? I wanted to be this high-level elite athlete who was the top of his game, but I also want to be Jack the lad. I actually had no connection to myself, no connection to the present moment. Not even a fucking clue what that word meant. I was playing again, I think I had another 6 caps, 5-6 years of pro rugby, and then bang, I was in the gym, and then that was when my next one hit. The doctors then said to me, listen, we don't know how long you've got, so just enjoy the time that you have left. That was literally the words that they said to me. And I said, how much longer do you think that I have with this heart? And they said 12 months. And I was like, fucking great.
Before you start this episode, please can you click subscribe below and follow our social handles in the description. It's a massive help and it keeps you up to date with all the exciting announcements from the podcast.
Rhys, thank you very much for coming onto the podcast this morning. I was going to say this afternoon, but this morning. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, thank you so much, mate. Looking forward to it.
Good man. Tons of stuff that we want to get into, but I'm just going to throw you straight in like we do with every guest with the first question. So what I want to is you've had a lot of things happening in your life, like we were saying before we went live, positive, challenging, etc., etc. We'll get into all of that stuff, but I'm going to give 1 minute to go from your early years life to present day in 1 minute. See if you can get a decent summary there for the audience. So you up for the challenge?
Yes, brother. Let's do it.
Go on then, your minute starts. Crack on.
Okay. Born in South Africa, loved sport, pursued it, left to go to my father's birth, a country which was Wales, succeeded in my ambition to reach the highest level of the sport, which I did. I played it, cap for my country, was married, started a family, living my best life, got cut down in my prime at 29 from a heart attack, went through a journey for 7 years, ended up sober and now living a life beyond my wildest dreams, sober, peaceful and happy, living from the heart.
Mate, that is a very concise summary, mate. And I can't wait to get stuck into it. Like we said before we came on live, we've taken some questions from our sort of audience on social media and stuff. We're going to definitely be digging into some of these experiences that you've had with your professional rugby career and how that all started, and obviously the health bits and pieces, but also some of the things that you're doing now, which is fantastic, and helping other people whilst you're sort of shaping your journey as well. So you mentioned you're born in Johannesburg, South Africa. So how did it come about in terms of the move to Wales? What was that? When did that happen, and how did that work?
Yeah, so my dad was Welsh, and you wouldn't have known it really. He didn't have a Welsh accent or anything, not that I could remember growing up. But we always kind of knew, that dad was Welsh. And I never really started playing rugby until I was 14 because I was in quite an English school growing up. I wasn't an Afrikaans speaker, and then when I went to school in my last year of primary school before I went to high school, South Africa won the World Cup in rugby in 1995. Oh. And it was just after apartheid, and the country was in a bit of a mess. And I think Nelson Mandela really unified the country, brought that little bit of that compassion, which is unbelievable considering the amount of time and what had happened to him in spending time in prison and on an island just off Cape Town. And he unified the country and the sport. And I was a young boy and I was like, wow, this is amazing. And when I went to high school, I started playing rugby for the first time at 14, and I loved it. I went to an amazing school, King Edward VII in Joburg. I was a boarder, and then by my 18-year-old, in my last year of school, I was like, I love rugby. I was starting to get some junior representative honours, and I thought, well, why not pursue this a bit further? I had an opportunity to go to Wales. I was offered an opportunity, and I decided to pursue that. I had a British passport. I had two stepbrothers that were living in Wales, and I just thought, why not give it a go? Let's see what can happen. I was going to travel anyway, mate. I was going to do a year's traveling, and I just ended up in Wales, and I was there 24 years.
Wow, yeah, big move, isn't it? What was it like growing up in South Africa as a kid? One of my best mates, and he owns one of the businesses that I own. We own him together. He's from South Africa, moved to Scotland of all places when he was really young. So he doesn't sort of remember too much of his sort of upbringing in South Africa, but you can certainly tell he's South African. He's very much direct to the point. Doesn't have the accent, but he's definitely got the traits. So how was sort of growing up in your native land as a kid?
I mean, it was great, mate. Obviously as a young boy, I can't remember any of the apartheid era, because we were kind of one of the first years to go through school where black and whites would be in the same class. There was no discrimination as such. There obviously was some lingering, ongoing kind of cultural change that was going to need to occur for people to change their mindset and their beliefs and this kind of ingrained pattern of behavior that had been enforced upon the people of color in the country. But I think all in all, it was, as a child, it was great. I was outside a lot, this nature was just all around us. It was very sporty. I was fortunate enough to be born into a very large family that was very supportive in all of our endeavors. Was
it a sporty family? Was there other people playing rugby, sport, stuff like that, or? Yeah,
so we were just passionate supporters of sport, So in South Africa in general, they just love it. Anything that's competition, they eat it up, And whether it's cricket or football, they call it soccer. Swimming, running, and obviously rugby is their absolute passion. It's like a religion out here, mate.
Would you say the rugby is bigger than cricket in South Africa as a whole?
Oh, it is now. I think if you had asked me this question in 95, 96, I would have said it would probably be, rugby was still huge, but now with the success and the World Cups that they've won, and also the rebalancing of seeing a lot more equality in the team, like a lot more of balance through that. I think what you're seeing is the country is just exploded. It's vibrant, the cultures and the diversity, and it's starting to bring it all together. It's really quite beautiful, brother, if I'm honest. I never envisioned that it would end up this way, and it's quite organic how it's happened, but it's also beautiful.
So you made that big jump to go over to Wales and play rugby. Obviously, your dad's heritage. Do you ever look back and think you wish you stayed in SA, or are you happy that you went over there?
No, mate, it was great. I got offered the opportunity to come home actually after my under-21 World Cup, which was in England. I was nominated as the best prop in my position at the World Cup out of all of the countries. They do a World Cup 15, and at that point, one of the teams in South Africa, the Sharks, came over and tried to entice me to go back. But at that time, I just felt like things were right. I'd been offered quite a large contract for my age at that time. I was playing a lot of rugby. I had made a lot of good friends. I just met my future, my first wife, and so things were good. I didn't need to leave.
So when you look back in terms of obviously professional rugby being a big part of your life, what do you think rugby's given you?
Wow. I think it taught me a lot, mate. It taught me the power of being in a brotherhood, that kind of tribe. Albeit sometimes it was a really unhealthy environment, most of the time the environment was around, achievement and excellence and perseverance and resilience and grit. And like a lot of these traits are fantastic traits, to keep showing up, when you have a bad day or you have a bad game or you lose, like how do we learn from this? And the best thing about sports, especially professional sports, you've always got the next week. And I think rugby instilled in me a lot of those values. It also instilled some some unfortunate values, with kind of perfectionism and fear of failure and a few other bits and bobs. But in most parts, those kind of camaraderie and friendship and the good parts of it are fantastic. The values that we learned were immense.
And do you get that thrown into you from a young age in that sort of rugby setup?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. From a young age, I think rugby's slightly different to football. It's quite like it's built on the team. Unlike, football where it is kind of individual, but it's not, it's a team. Whereas rugby, you can't do anything without the team. You're as strong as your weakest link. And if your weakest link is not showing up, the team's going to suffer as a whole. So it is a real team sport, and communication, super important. If you're not communicating, if you're not able to communicate and switch on too, like being able to cross from over that whitewash and whatever the shit you've got going on in your life, whatever's going on, the minute you cross over that whitewash, you got to be there. And if you're not there, the world will know.
Yeah, absolutely. You're going to get exposed at that level, especially, aren't you? So you mentioned sort of negative stuff around like fear of failure and stuff. Isn't it weird how some of those negatives, have you ever used any of those negatives and turned those on their head and use them to sort of propel you forward? Or are you naturally a kind of positive glass half full person and don't really need that because you're kind of full of optimism and energy anyway? Because, for me personally, the fear of failure and the ability to want to prove other people wrong.
Yeah,
I love that stuff. Like I love that stuff. Like, I don't get me wrong. Like, I could give a wanky answer here and say, oh, my biggest, drivers are my family and this and that. And don't get me wrong. A lot of people, including myself, we do it for ourselves. We do it for our family. We want to have a good life and we want our family and our kids to be secure and happy. But when I'm in the trenches, it goes against me to think about my family because I feel I get too mushy and emotional and I don't deliver what I need to deliver. I do quite a bit of running and I've done ultras and marathons and other bits and pieces. And when I'm in the shit, the fear of not achieving or the fear of not doing something I've said, or I bring up 5-6 people from my past that all told me, you can't start a business, you're not good enough, you can't do this, you can't do that. And that anger towards those people drives me forward. How did you use that sort of stuff? How do you sort of shape your kind of energy and dynamism?
Yes, it's so funny you say that, Aaron, because I was exactly the same. There were 3 words that lit me up like nothing else. You will never. If you said those 3 words to me, it was like a fire under my ass. I was like, you fucking wait, brother. I promise you, I'm going all the way. And the problem was, Aaron, I had a huge issue with authority. So like anyone that was, I had a big problem with it. So I like to do things my own way. Growing up, I was very stubborn. I think a lot of that was also drilled into me from boarding school, where it was still a lot of like corporal punishment and stuff like that, which took me, if anything, it actually brought more resolve and more stubbornness because I was like, I'm not folding to any of this. Like, you keep coming. Like, it's not gonna dim my light. And to my own detriment very often. But I think in most part, I'd always ended up going the long way, Aaron. It was always like I could have just gone the easy route, just towed the line, been a little bit more disciplined, have a little bit more, being able to bite my tongue, take accountability, admit when I was wrong. But instead, I'd always go the long road. But I would always get there, but it would be a slog. And I didn't really understand at the same time that underneath a lot of those fears, there was the fear of also greatness, like how, being able to, what happens if I actually reach my full potential, and that in itself, I didn't even realize that till way after I finished the sport. Was like that was
Explain
actually
that a little bit more.
Yeah, so I think what I didn't really understand was that I had a huge amount of potential, a tremendous amount, almost to the point where I relied on it almost entirely. And there's a great saying that I quote often is, hard work beats talent when talent fails to work hard. And I think for me, it was like I half-assed a lot of things, my conditioning, my application at scrum time, how much of a professional I was, how much I wasn't boozing on the weekends, smoking fags, etc. So like for me, it was almost like had this limitation that what actually if I am as good as I know I can be, because then wow, like what will happen then? Like what expectation will be on my shoulders? How much pressure will that be? And I didn't see this at the time. I didn't even know it. It was out of my conscious awareness. And this has only like come through even later in my years of retirement. It's kind of settled on me that I was like, whoa, because I always thought, what is it? The fear of failure. And I was like, no, that wasn't so much it. I actually think it was the fear of greatness, of being fully seen in my full power of what I could achieve. But to do that would have meant that I had to eradicate a whole list of traits. And I think in most part, was I prepared to release all of these traits that I told myself that I loved, having fun, which would require discipline and commitment. I think my ego and myself had these battles with like, that we can be here, but I'm happy here because I get to do all of this cool shit. So a lot of it was based, I think, in this inner battle that I was constantly having, with myself.
So when you're talking about having that sort of inner battle, and you obviously growing up and stuff, who would you say your sort of biggest inspiration? Who when you got into that sort of rugby scene, who are you looking up to? Who are you sharing dressing rooms with? Who are you looking at thinking, do you know what, I need to, when you're having these battles of, do I up the game and realize how good I am, or do I stay in a more comfortable place and enjoy it and stuff? Like, who are you looking at and trying to get kind of that information and help from?
I think this is where the environment has such a huge effect on us, Aaron. And I think you know this as well as anyone. And anyone knows, right? Environment drives culture. And I think for me, the culture at the time, especially with Wales, was we were successful. Our rugby team was extremely successful. Some would argue potentially the golden age. We were winning Grand Slams, and I was only part of that team for like almost 4 years. But in which time, we did win a Grand Slam at the Six Nations. But in most part, there were people I looked up to and like, wow, what a player. But I also respected massively like the boys that were loose and that were getting up to all sorts, but then could still show up on a Saturday.
Still turn it on. Yeah.
And then so like it became this laddish type culture of like, wow, look, he can do X, Y, and Z. And he's doing that every weekend and this every week. And he's still putting 80 minutes out on a Saturday and getting like man of the match. And so like I was kind of always, there was this double side of me that's like, I wanted to be this high level elite athlete who was the top of his game. But then I was also like, but I also want to be Jack the lad. And I want to be like, I want to be seen as like this larger than life caner that can, but then what I didn't realize, because I was trying to live these double lives, was that to achieve this high level of that I had to sacrifice. I couldn't do both together. Some people could, and I admired that. I valued it, but I actually wasn't able to do that. And ultimately, it had a huge detriment to my game, because whilst I was trying to become a regular starter, which I never really was, I also ended up falling behind because I was trying to keep up with them. And but I wasn't an established first team player.
You're trying to keep up with both sides, aren't you?
Huh?
Yeah, you're trying to keep up with both sides and not pick
Exactly.
one as such. Yeah. Yeah. What do you reckon that your teammates at the time, how would they describe you as a character?
Um, yeah, I was maybe just a nice guy, a bit loose. Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's been such a long time. I'm trying to look back
Yeah.
on it. Yeah, I mean, you'd have to ask some of them, I suppose.
I suppose with the stuff you've been through, you're not the same person as you was before, with the experiences that you've had in your life.
Yeah, honestly, Aaron, it feels like a previous life, brother, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
Genuinely.
Yeah. So with the rugby stuff, so I think rugby's got a culture, hasn't it? That's like, in a way, sort of glorifies toughness. You see these geezers going to war and jumping over each other, studying people, fucking getting into scraps and scrapes and piling on top of each other. And it's sort of, I sort of follow football more than rugby, but I love the international scene. Where I'm from, we've got the Saints, Northampton Saints. Obviously, they've had quite a bit of success. But I would rather watch England play rugby than England play football, even though I like a round ball rather than an egg-shaped ball. And I haven't really played too much rugby myself, other than at school days. So I think rugby, sometimes the culture glorifies that toughness, doesn't it? And how do you think that you've used that toughness later on in life, that sort of mindset?
Yeah, I mean, if anything, mate, I've had to untrain myself in many ways, because I think when we play in rugby, it was like that toughness was so valuable. Like, because also it was a long season. We never went into a game where we weren't carrying a knock, or we were stiff, or we had some form of injury that we were just covering over, or maybe some boys were still concussed, right? There was a lot of, back in our days, it was a hell of a lot less monitored. So I think as I've grown into the person I am today, it was more about, like, I had that ability to check out easily. I used to be able to have, like, I got a high threshold of pain tolerance and this, that, and the other thing. But I think that connection with my body, albeit as an athlete, I was quite receptive. Oh, I've got a tight, I knew when the connection to my body was strong. It was my money making tool, right? So I knew, like, I had a tight groin, tight hammy, or maybe it's this part of my body sore, that part. But actually, the collisions, the contacts, the way that I was living excessively in every aspect, like hard training, hard exercising, hard eating, hard playing, all these aspects, I actually had no connection to myself, like deeper connection, like my mind-body connection, like being able to notice, like, what are my emotions? How does this actually feel when I push too fast, too hard, too much? Because, like, where is my edge? Where is my barrier? How much of this is ego? How much of this is, am I not listening to what my body needs, as opposed to thinking what I want? And, like, so this, no connection to nervous system. No connection to the present moment. Not even a fucking clue what that word meant. So, like, this, like, my emotional intelligence was diabolical, and that was also linked to my physical. Like my contact, my connection to body. It was just this. It was just like, for want of a better word, it was my weapon, it was my tool. It what paid the bills was just making sure that I was big, I was strong, I was fit, I was as healthy as possible, albeit my diet was always very average. It was just, yeah.
Also, you capped for Wales in sort of between 2006 2009. You had your debut against Argentina in 2006. When did you find out you had chest issues in terms of what was going on? So you ended up having a heart attack training for the Scarlets in 2012. We can get into that in a bit more detail. But how did it? There's obviously 6 years between you making your debut for Wales, and did you know at that point there was something going on? Did you feel differently, or is it just the fact that you're not really connected with your body, like you just said, where you kind of think, well, maybe it's just a niggle, crack on?
Yeah. My first one, like you said, was in 2000 I don't know. I think it was about late 2006. And that heart attack because they said that heart attack that I had, which was post-match, funnily enough, Aaron, against Northampton Saints.
Was it really?
Yeah, at Rodney Parade in Newport. And as I was walking back to the car, I wasn't feeling very well at all, and I just decked her. And my whole left arm went like Spider-Man, and like super pain up my neck, and I was being sick and I couldn't breathe. I was ripping my shirt. I thought I was going to die. Like, it was horrendous. And then the ambulance crew got there. They put me in the ambulance, put these ECGs on, and they said, yeah, you're having a heart attack. And I was like, what? But I'd been having these symptoms for about probably 3 months prior, and they were misdiagnosing me. They were telling me I had heartburn. I was eating too much. But I knew it. I was like, it's in my heart. Like, I can't be more specific where the sensation's coming from. And then I was getting breathlessness, but I was using caffeine. And what I didn't realize, Aaron, I was actually super fucking sensitive to caffeine, like super sensitive. But we were banging in it was the first time caffeine was legalized in rugby. And then I was having these pre-match or pre-workout with, like, you know, whatever else caffeine stuff floating around. And that's the first time I had a gripper, was like back again at the beginning of that season against Glasgow. And dude, it was just hectic, you know, and they misdiagnosed it for a long time, and eventually it did come around, and I did have that heart attack. But then I was clear. They let me back. I was playing again, you know. I think I had another 6 caps. Another like 5-6 years of pro rugby, and then bang, I was in the gym, and then that was when my next one hit.
Wow. So it's amazing. It's amazing that you can go and have that sort of an experience and then go back to top level performance with no real. Or were you still experiencing issues during that time, or the issues gone, and then it just reared its head again in the gym, or?
Yeah, it was pretty rough, mate, because short term, I remember them. It was an emotional roller coaster. You can imagine, I've just had my first cap for Wales. I'm 20? Yeah. I was 24 years old. Like, the world was at my feet. And then all of a sudden, I'm having 50% of doctors tell me I'm never going to play rugby again. And I've got 50% of the other doctors telling me that I may be able to play rugby again. So I was just going on this complete, like, mental hell roller coaster, until eventually they took it to this, like, medical conference, and they proposed my case to the fraternity that were there, and they said, what should we allow him to go back? And they decided that just over 50% voted that they think that it would be fine with these types of steps. So I had 6 months off. I had to continue on beta blockers and something else. But obviously, beta blockers were a nightmare because they were keeping my heart rate down, where I'm going balls out, you know, at the coalface, trying to, you know, keep my, you know, my level of performance high. So it was initially in the short term. In the short term, coming back, it was bloody challenging. And I only had a small amount of physical damage to the heart because I didn't have a heart. The blood stoppage to the heart wasn't for too long. But yeah, so that's what enabled me to go back to the sport. But after about a year, I stopped the meds, and then my performance did return. But I always had a slight issue around my conditioning, whether that was because of the heart or just my lifestyle, etc. Who knows?
That's got to be a huge head fuck, really, isn't it? On your part, it's like you're in professional rugby, playing to a great standard, playing for a top Welsh side, playing for your country, getting capped, playing against great players. So you know that you need to be in top condition, and you've got to be putting the effort in, or you're not going to get your spot. Versus, there must have been an element of you that thinks, if I go too hard, this is going to happen again.
Yeah, I mean, definitely in the short term, there was a bit of that for me. It was like, you know, like feeling my heart going like fucking, you know, 180 in the chest, while I'm like getting absolutely beasted by my performance team. And then it's like, yeah, is everything okay? You know, that little bit of fear for sure was there. But I think as time went on, that did subside.
Yeah. Have you had, you know, you mentioned it briefly, but did you have, is there one specific point around your health with the heart attacks and operations that you've had and bits and pieces over those few years? Was there a specific time where you thought you genuinely believed that you wouldn't make it?
Oh yeah, fuck. Um, so my second heart attack, when I woke up, so when I had my second heart attack when I was at the Scarlets, I was conscious throughout, but it wasn't as painful as my first one. So I was kind of like, I was super dizzy. I couldn't breathe, but I wasn't having that arm pain. So I knew I was having a heart attack. I just didn't realize the severity. So I assumed because of the pain compared to the last one, I was like, it doesn't feel as bad. So I'll be okay.
Yeah.
So I thought they'll just do the same thing they did before, little angiogram, clear out the clot, and off we'll go. Because that's what happened both times. I had something called a spontaneous dissection, which caused a clot downstream in the heart.
Yeah.
So this time when I had this, it got when I got to the hospital, they started to go through the angiogram, but they couldn't clear the clot, and then it just went crazy. And then it was an emergency, and I was very lucky to survive. Actually, the doctor said that had I not been as fit as I was, that I probably would have not have survived the operation. But post-op then meant that I was really damaged, and I'd lost a lot of my organ. Over 50% of it had died in the heart attack. So when I woke up, I was very, very groggy. I felt very ill. And because of this, my state of health, they'd actually made me lie down with this balloon inserted through my groin next to the heart so that my heart wasn't beating too much.
Right, okay.
And they said, whatever you do, you can't puke. It's going to put too much stress on the heart. So we're going to have to give you like anti-sick medicine to like stop you from puking. So they were giving me all sorts because I felt so nauseous. I wasn't allowed to sit up for 5 days. I was completely disorientated, no idea where I was, what was going on, who was around me. Like, it was awful. And I just thought, like, this is like, surely this is, I'm going. I can't see how I'm going to make this one. And then after I came out of hospital, that first year my health was so bad. And then the second year, then before I had this machine, I remember just feeling so terrible. I couldn't even walk 10 meters without being completely out of breath. I couldn't walk up my stairs from my kitchen to my room.
A quick word from one of our sponsors, Guru Technology. Simply put, they're the highest Google-rated company in their industry. A very different service and a very different set of products covering business-to-business mobiles, phone systems, energy, renewables and EV, security, CCTV, alarms, AMPR, broadband and IT. They specialise in dealing with companies who are receiving really poor service and spending a lot of money currently with their supplier. They will come to site, do a free of charge audit and fix any problems that you're having. So if you've got problems with your current supply chain, search Guru Technology in Google and give them a buzz. Thank you. Let's get back to the podcast.
How do you deal with that when you're like, these are the two big polar opposites, aren't they?
Yeah.
Not theirs, albeit you're obviously feeling incredibly grateful you're still here, I'm guessing, but not being able to walk up the stairs and having that frustration of being out of breath and in pain or whatever, not being able to do certain things, and playing professionally against the best in the world when you're as fit as a fiddle. They're two completely polar opposite places to be. So how did you deal with that?
I mean, terribly is the best answer. Like, but in that short term, especially the first 2 years post my quadruple bypass, was that I was so fucked. My health was so bad, but in that time, the physical battle was one aspect that I was used to. Like you said, Aaron, it's almost like that was what rugby prepared me for. I was used to battle. Like, this was another battle. And I was like, right, my battle here now is just to go one day at a time until I can get my health back and hopefully return to the same level that I wish and I can remember it being able to just do everything that I wished to do, right, to the maximum. But at the same time, my rugby family had shit on me. Like I had no support. The insurance didn't cover me, so I didn't get a payment protection. I didn't get a career-ending injury payment. I was going to the WRU, all the clubs, and they were just pieing me off, mate. Like I was head in the sand, like an ostrich, and to go to the next person, because they didn't want to take accountability for it, which was like that mentally hit me probably harder than what I was dealing with physically, because I just always assumed that I'd have this beautiful rugby family that would be there for me. So that I was facing those two challenges at the same time. And I remember going to the doctor just before 2014 and saying, "But please, there's got to be something more. Like I'm basically dying. I can't even walk 10 meters without being completely out of breath."
So there was no progress during that time. Nothing to get a little bit optimistic about. Things were moving in the right direction. It was just plateauing at shit.
I was deteriorating, actually.
Oh, really?
My health was deteriorating. To the point where I couldn't pick my children up to hug them. I'd get so out of breath. Like the most basic fundamental things of being like a human, I couldn't do. So the doctors then said to me, "Listen, we don't know how long you've got, so just enjoy the time that you have left." That was literally the words that they said to me.
How do you deal with that? Like, how do you deal with that comment from this is a doctor, this is someone who knows what they're talking about, someone that's been there, done it, seen everything, trained for many years. How do you deal with that fact that you're sitting at that point, I'm guessing, with a family and everything
4
as well?
Kids, wife.
Talk to me about that particular moment when he said, "I'm not sure you're going to make it." Where's your head at? What are you thinking? What's going on?
I honestly, Aaron, my health was in such a shit place at the time that I just thought this is the end. I had given up. There was sadness for sure. I remember a lot of sadness, and like disbelief almost in where, because I was on the verge of a move to France on a very large 6-figure contract to move to a club in France, on the verge, when I had my heart attack, my second one. So that was also in the background, like I would have been in France, living the best life.
You found your family sorted for many years, yeah?
Yeah, literally, like job done. And then my new reality is I'm basically on death's doorstep. And I remember I got my critical illness payment come through. And I just said to my ex-wife, I said, "Let's just go on holiday." I said, "Let's just go and do things with the kids." I said, because like the doctor said, I'm probably not, I could possibly die. And, let's just go and enjoy it with the kids. So I literally remember we booked Mexico, we booked a couple other places. And I remember being there in Mexico with my kids and my house, and I was fucked. I couldn't even walk 10 meters. And I remember I'd have to go by the pool and then go back in the room because I was just knackered. I'd sleep with the aircon on. And just being like, this is it. Like, and this must be the end. It's got to be close. Yeah. It's got to be close, And then I got given a lifeline with this machine in 2014.
Is that the LVAD?
Yeah, the LVAD. So it's called the left ventricular assist device, where they literally said they can implant this machine to reduce the pulmonary hypertension, because I wasn't transplantable. So they said, this was the thing. After I had gone through this process, they actually said I was untransplantable, which basically they said, and I said, "Oh, how much longer do you think that I have with this heart?" And they said 12 months. And I was like, fucking great. So then they said, the only other thing is this machine. So I had the machine implanted then in 2014. And that, again, I was in a coma for 2 weeks post-op, had a really traumatic experience during that actual operation to get through all my scar tissue. And then the coma itself was just crazy, like the most insane experience. It felt like I had like 4 different entire lives in that coma. induced
there's not many
coma.
people that go into a coma and then actually talk about it afterwards. So it is something I've wondered about when you have family and people that you know and whatever that sometimes not very well and stuff. Like, talk to me about that. What you remember about that experience?
Well, I was having separate lives. I was having different life experiences. Now, I still to this day, I see it quite differently. I used to call them my nightmares because they used to put me straight into a panic attack post-op, when I woke up from the coma. That would put me instantly into a panic attack. But then over time, with a lot of different work, like somatic work, therapy work, I actually quite see it quite differently. Maybe it was a alternative timeline experience, or a kind of past life incarnation. But like some of them, I was on the slab, heart, chest open, my entire doctor team here, a different entire doctor team here, slight different color and shade. And they said if I had touched anyone on this side of the screen, the team I didn't know, that I would go there. But instead of an anesthetist, they had this like person doing spells, like a little, like a kind of witch doctor thing.
Mm.
And I slapped its hand because it like touched my dick. And then in my coma, the nurse said, "Did you just touch that side?" I said, "Yeah." And then I went there. And when I woke up, I was in this hospital. And I was walking around this hospital and I was like, "Where's my family?" I didn't know the hospital. I didn't know the place. And then I walked around and I got it let out. And I walked out through the front door to the outside of this hospital. All the taxis that were there. I could see the city in the background. No idea where I was, mate. Nowhere I'd ever been before, put it that way. And I got a taxi into town. I got a job. I started a life. I had a best friend. I had a girlfriend. I lived in like
all this happening in this 2-week period of being.
That was one part of one of the things I went through. Wow. There were like 3 other sections to this. It was crazy. Like, it was insane. I promise you. Like,
sounds like that film that came out, Inception. And eventually, when different lives being lived,
the mad thing was when I woke up, right? Eventually, I'd had a tracheotomy, because after so many days, if they can't leave the pipe in the mouth because of infection, so then they put the tracheotomy, so they put the breathing apparatus through your throat. So when I woke up, they removed the tracheotomy, but obviously there's a hole in my throat. So I didn't know if I was in reality or not, and I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified, and all I wanted to know that what I was witnessing was real. And my ex-wife was there, and the nurse, and I couldn't speak. I was so drugged up, but I wanted to. I tried to speak, and when I spoke, the air was coming out of my throat, and no words were coming out of my mouth because of the tracheotomy. And the nurse was saying, "Cover the hole in your throat." And I was like, "What fucking hole?" But then when she did it for me, and I was like speaking like this for a bit. And then I was like, "Oh my God, this is a joke." Like, so like, obviously I overcame that experience in itself, which was just insane. It was fucking insane. And then when I went home, it brought me a better value of life, this new machine. And with that was like this new beginning of like this physical battle brought a little bit of quality of life back to my ability to walk and do the most fundamental basics. But then at the same time, mentally, then that's when the real battle began, because like I was having to process my career ending, my loss of purpose, loss of identity, that support system that I thought my rugby family gone, they shit on me. And I just went on this absolute self-destruct path.
Is that where you sort of relationship, right? So I'm speaking from one divorcee to another here. Like, is that where you kind of, that side of it as well went downhill?
I mean, to be honest with you, there were other things, characteristics of mine, traits that probably should have maybe led to it would have possibly have led to that regardless of what happened to me.
Okay.
But I think through this process, it's kind of like it made it almost. I went into self-pity. And then when I went into self-pity, I kind of just went into self-sabotage. And that just made everything so much worse.
So tell me a bit about that then. What started happening? What did you start doing?
Yeah, so basically I couldn't live with the thoughts in my head, mate. In the end, it was just like this overwhelming, like going back to the past, all the good times, my rugby career, the what ifs, I should have done that, I should have done this, I should have applied myself better, I should have been more disciplined, I could have been a great. At the same time, I was like, oh, what about that French contract, living in Biarritz? Oh, amazing. But none of it was real. And then to the future, and like, how do I see a positive future for myself? I've got a machine that runs my heart. I've got to change my batteries every 8 hours or I can die. Like, what kind of life is this? I don't have a life. I don't work. I don't do anything. I had a payment protection policy that was covering me at the time. And, that kept me going. And the only thing that really kept me going was my kids and my family, and my ex. It was just this like, it was just a situation. And in the end, I just needed to dull this down. And the only thing that I knew that got me out of here at the time, was booze. So obviously with this machine, my heart was also not in a great condition. I needed a heart transplant. I was on the list. And I asked the doctors, I said, can I have a drink? And they said, yeah, as long as you don't go over your fluid restriction. Because of my heart, I had a fluid restriction. It was 2.5 liters a day of any fluid. So I was like, oh, great. So back to the rugby club. I was coaching now at this point because I still needed that, that comfy blanket, that little bit of familiarity. So I went back to what I knew, that environment, that culture, and then 1 beer, 2 beers, but obviously 2 pints, 3 pints. That means it's almost a litre and a half. That felt nice. I was almost, and then eventually I was like, right, I'll have to move to shots. Shots was never my bag. And then next thing you know, it's, a bottle of gin, bottle and a half of gin. And then it's, bottles of wine. And in a very short period of time, mate, things went downhill pretty rapid. So by about 2019, things were not good, like chronically not good. And then I crashed my car drunk. Of the 1st September 2019, crashed my car drunk. And that's when I knew, like, shit was bad. My life was falling apart in front of my eyes. I had absolutely annihilated my marriage. I had traumatized my children. I had, done a pretty good job. I was a miracle I was still alive. And a few months later, thankfully for me, with my friends from school, they put me into rehab. They staged an intervention and put me into rehab. Yeah, it was a complete life-changing event. It was
did you just go cold turkey sort of thing? How long did that rehab go for? What last for? What happened there?
Yeah, so from that car crash, I didn't actually have a drink again from that point, but I kind of cross-addicted. I was using cannabis drops, playing FIFA for like 12 hours a day, like 6, 8, 10 hours a day.
So you bet your addiction's manifesting in different ways.
Oh yeah, all sorts of other, porn, all sorts of stuff, mate. And I didn't even know it. I couldn't even see how fucked I was. Right, that is the level of denial that I was in. So when I went to visit a friend, I was on a family holiday actually, visiting one of my best friends who lives in Mauritius. And he paid for me to go with the family, my ex-wife, my 2 kids, because I'd stayed sober over Christmas. And when I was there, my ex told him all the shit I'd been up to. And he was like, he organized with 3 of my other friends, my brother and my dad. And they staged that intervention and sent me to rehab. So I entered that rehab on the 1st of Feb, 2020. And mate, it was the most life-saving, most world-changing experience of my life. It was everything I didn't know I needed. And in that, like in those moments of like deep vulnerability and honesty and transparency and reflection, and also people not taking my shit. Like, I was surrounded by addicts. I was surrounded by therapists and recovered addicts. You know, and there's no bullshitting an addict, mate. There's, you know, like, it's not going to happen.
Been there and done it, like, yeah.
Yeah. So the whole process was very revealing. It gave me a huge level of understanding of maybe why I was so fucked up. And then we started to do some of the work. And for me, the main thing was the like-minded community that it gave me. And that opportunity to be surrounded by strangers in community, in a circle, and all talking about each other's shit. And it was some of them were stories you just can't imagine, bro. You know, like things that you just don't think are possible for human beings to achieve. Like the depravity and the carnage and the, you know, it is insane. And we all know someone who's an addict, right, brother? So it's not like one of us is, we're not here to judge. We have all been there, right? But being in that space and hearing that level of honesty in a circle was one of the first times in my life I'd ever experienced that. And it was just like, it was deeply nourishing, actually. And I was like, wow, do you know what? For the first time in my life, I feel like I can be fully honest and not judged for that. So I can be fully seen, heard, and not held in that environment, but I could start to put together the pieces and be honest about it, you know, fully, and I mean fully honest about all of the shit that I've done through not just through my years in rugby, my whole life, my entire life. So the process was deep. It was deep. It was necessary. It was painful. It was vulnerable, but it was so, so, so empowering and so potent that I had some sort of like spiritual awakening when I was in there. And after, like when I left, I was just like, it gave me a newfound purpose. It gave me a new sense of identity. And the identity was that I had no identity. I had no fucking idea who I was. I was a 37-year-old man and I did not know who I was. And although I genuinely found that terrifying, and I remember the feeling that I felt at the time was vulnerability. I had this huge, overwhelming sense of vulnerability. But I knew that I had a clear why. My why was my kids. I was like, I need to be a better dad. I can't change the past. The past is done. I've fucked up big time. But I understand why I've fucked up. And I've got a lineage that is full of men that has behaved in similar ways to me. And I can't let this carry on anymore. It needs to end. I need to break the
T-junction moment, wasn't it?
Yeah, I need to break the chain of this trauma in my bloodline. And I was just like, I am going to try my absolute hardest for this to never. So it's at least my children know that change is possible. No matter how fucked you are, change is possible. And I think that was the beginning of it, mate, for me, was when I left. I had this insatiable drive and want and hunger to be a better man. That was the long and short of it. And I knew that to do that, I had to go to the depths of my soul, be honest, be vulnerable, speak my truth, but also seek more help. I needed a lot of help, because I'm not just going to unwind 37 years of habitual behavior and beliefs and values and inner thoughts. You know, I've got to change the ego. You know, I've got to embrace my ego. I've got to understand my shadow. You know, I needed to integrate a lot of stuff. And that was a huge process that was top down, but also bottom up. And there's so much within that I used, so many different therapies and approaches that helped me to be where I am today.
So that brings us nicely then to kind of what you're doing now, what you've been doing recently. So yeah, let's dig into a bit of that, because you've got charity stuff that you're doing. We've spoken about these retreats that you facilitate and stuff like that. You do a lot of speaking. You've got the empowerment breath work bits and pieces that I've seen on your Instagram profile that we've spoken about before. So how does what's life look like now? What are you doing? How are you using those historic sort of traumas and experiences to shape other people's lives, but also help you continue down a really positive path?
Yeah, I think I found that, Aaron, my superpower was there all along. I didn't know that it was there, and that was being authentic, and that was being present. And sadly for me, I thought that I had to be something I wasn't my whole life. Whereas actually, when I embraced who I truly was, the soft parts of me and the other parts of me, was like when I started to connect the real power, that feminine, that masculine aspect that was within me. But also I had a lot of shit to sort out in my shadow. So once I did integrate that, it allowed me to start showing up authentically. And this is a constant work on, Aaron. It's not like you just flick a button and I'm not, hallelujah, I'm healed, I'm fixed.
Yeah, I'm fixed. Yeah.
I transcended my ego, and now I'm enlightened. It's nothing like, it's not.
Yeah.
It's every day is a grind, brother. Life is life. It's going to keep coming at us. And I think now I just have the resources and the experience to know, and the accountability of my beautiful partner, and my fiance, sorry, who can shine a mirror on me and just call me out on my bullshit. And I call myself out on my bullshit as well, mate. But I think now what it allowed me to do is to be able to presence myself, to be more tuned to the things that I'm doing in my life, to appreciate, to be grateful for the opportunity to actually be alive, to be able to be sat here, taking a breath, having a conversation with a like-minded brother, who's trying to do good. And that was it for me, was that I realized there was so much suffering in our world. I just thought it was in my little world, in my little rugby community, in my little village in Wales. But what I've really come to realize through starting the mental health charity with Matthew Creel and Cares, which is in South Wales, and seeing a lot of people, and it's a mental health and well-being charity, and just with that scope and that hat on now, the amount of people that are all in the same boat, brother, we are all facing the same challenges. We are all facing the same battles with mind, with the thought pattern, with attachment to past and future, and holding on to so much shame, whether that's ancestral or generational or even in your own lifetime. And I think for a lot of us, our challenges are so similar, but we don't realize it. And very often we isolate ourselves. And as our world is going deeper into the process and the place that we are in, we're becoming more isolated. We're becoming, we need community. We need connection, but we're becoming more disconnected, more isolated. And this is why I think you see in the UK these shockingly bad suicide rates, addiction rates, all sorts of different illnesses and ailments that are coming around from a lack of connection with nature, and also with other human beings. So that's what I long to do, was like be of service, is to bring, that bit of connection and community back to people's lives. But it all starts within, Aaron. And that's what I found, was that all the looking and longing of the things I was looking for were always within me. And when I found that, which was multifaceted through many ways and means, and I did a lot of men's retreats and lots of different therapies, somatic work. But ultimately, breath work was what took me into my heart. And when I started to know that it was just me that could impact my life, that could love myself, that could create and build, and all these beautiful things were within me. So then I kind of like wanted to give some back. So I do that now with with the charity. We do a lot of great work with my breath work, with my speaking, my public speaking, my coaching. I help clients through changes that they're navigating, and also just helping them with being able to use their breath to help with resilience, with stress, to also level up in performance, but also the transformation that we can get from transformational type breath techniques is profound. It's profound. It was one of the greatest.
Why do you think that's something that's so powerful? Breathwork. Why is it so powerful?
Because in a nutshell, without getting technical, we are able to, through the technique of connecting each inhale to each exhale with our pause, guided with the breath, with a playlist and prompts, we can turn off our prefrontal cortex and we can go back to the hippocampus and the limbic brain and enter into the wisdom of the body. All this, the fascia, all of this information that we store in the body, in our nervous systems, also in the back brain, we can tap into that subconscious and the unconscious, the body. And through this practice, through this process, we can, without actually any speaking, it's just you and the breath. And when we are like the breath, and the breath is only ever present, if we can just be with it, practicing it in this technique, it brings us straight back to the body, to the present moment. And then whatever is lying in our subconscious, it comes up for processing. And if we are willing then to integrate what is come up for us through this process, that is the gold. Because all of those things that underlie our conscious awareness that are actually driving us, like Carl Jung said, until we make the unconscious conscious, it will rule our lives and we will call it fate. Right. So the beautiful thing that I love about breath work, especially transformational techniques like Conscious Connected, is that it takes us into the subconscious. But the importance is safety. We have to feel safe. We have to have a resource into being grounded or being held by someone who can enable us to feel safe enough to go into those places, because it can be very revealing. We have a lot come up. Sometimes it's emotion. Sometimes it's a vision. Sometimes it's transcendental. These altered states of consciousness are so deep. They're actually known now scientifically. It's like doing a half dose of a hero journey of mushrooms, right? So they light up all the same areas of the brain. So it's very potent practice. They've known this for thousands of years, but we're just catching up with the science now.
Amazing. Well, I think thinking about your journey to this point and sort of turning your life around and moving forward and helping other people, like we said, that's giving you the purpose to keep going forward. What do you think are the biggest takeaways people watching, listening to this can have? What would you like people to take away from your journey so far?
That change is possible, no matter how bad or how fucked up things seem. Change is always possible. Always ask for help. Like, I can't emphasize it enough. Human beings struggle terribly with asking people for help, and it doesn't have to be when you're desperate. It can be anytime. If people have been to the place where they are struggling, or they've struggled and they've reached out for some type of therapy, one of the biggest mistakes that I ever made was just believing that there was one type of therapy, which was speaking therapy. The biggest changes and the most profound shifts that I ever had were from alternative therapy. So things like neuro-linguistic programming, things like IFS, internal family systems, family constellations. I did EFT, the tapping, and then some of the more somatic practices, breath work, but also like things like brotherhood. For me, men's circles, going to men's retreats, like being vulnerable and being held by another man who is integral and is he's doing good work with men. Like, that is medicine, brother, for the soul. So like there's many different ways, and the same for women. They do women retreats too, right? Women's retreats, all sorts of beautiful things. So it's not just for men. There's both sides of the of the aisle. That's very, very potent medicine is for us to be in those spaces. But just know that, yeah, there's always something out there for you, and we may all need different things, and that's beautiful too. So, but also give breathwork a bash. I mean, I use it all the time, whether it's functional just for down regulation, or whether you want to go deep dive and transformational and try something like conscious connected. The only thing was I would err on a side of caution with using facilitators that are well trained, because we are in a very vulnerable state. So knowing someone's background and their training, etc., is highly, highly important, because there are unfortunate stories of people that aren't particularly well trained. This technique is fairly simple to execute. So there's a lot of cowboys, but what they don't understand is they can actually re-traumatize. So very, very important to understand that, and trust the person. Trust yourself when you're in that person's energy too, because if he doesn't feel right or they don't feel right,
probably not right. Yeah,
absolutely.
So okay. So if anybody wants to reach out, mate, to talk about whether it be the breathwork stuff that you're doing, whether it be the charity work that you're doing, whether it be the retreats and that sort of thing, or just have a chat with maybe they're going through a tough time, whether it be health, addiction, whatever it is, where can people find you, mate? Where's best to contact you and find out more?
Yeah, so I'll be the best place to get me is either on my Instagram. So it's real Rhys Thomas, spelled the Welsh way, RHYS. Also on LinkedIn, just Rhys Thomas. I'm sure on socials when you post this or wherever that'll be, there'll be a little link in there. But yeah, please come and get hold of me. I'm currently living in South Africa because I'm on the urgent transplant list as I wait for my heart. But I'm still running retreats. I'm still working with my clients. Still doing breath work. I do stuff online. But if you would wish to, if you ever are passing through Cape Town, and I highly recommend it, it is phenomenal. Drop by. I've always got stuff going on.
Wicked. All right then, mate. Well, look, thanks very much for your time. Your sort of journey to date's very inspirational, very real, very honest, and very open in the way you've discussed it, which is everything that we're about in terms of covering people's journeys, so we can make sure that the people listening and watching get the maximum amount squeezed from every single episode that we produce. So really appreciate you being vulnerable with us today and being honest and open, and fingers crossed some good news in terms of transplant and bits and pieces and everything for the future, mate. Appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Aaron. Have a good day.